Well, thank you, Florian. I can't even see you anymore with the light, and thank you all for having me. As you can probably tell from the fact that I'm wearing a suit, I'm a little bit out of my own habitat right now, and therefore I would like to invite you all to do this a little bit differently, because you're all very deep in cybersecurity. I am not, even though my last name, which was mentioned quite a few times in the previous talk, would suggest otherwise. I am rather deep in German healthcare, especially hospitals. I've been doing that for 30 years now. My father used to be a heart surgeon. I was in the operating theater as a little kid, so I probably know a thing or two about that you haven't heard before, and therefore I'd like to invite you to interrupt me at any moment with any questions, comments, need for discussion. We don't have to do this in a presentation and discussion afterwards fashion. So if you want to, and by the fact that you're sitting here and not somewhere else, I assume that you do, let's dive a little bit into German hospitals especially, because there's a massive change concerning cybersecurity, not only cybersecurity, but especially cybersecurity at this very moment. And I assume that a couple of you will play a role in that in the very near future. So what's happening right now is that a system of hospitals, and that a really big system of hospitals, almost nobody in the world has as many hospitals per capita as we Germans have. There are reasons for that. A very big, a very diverse system, a very underfunded and a very deficiency system is faced with major new challenges from outside. And these challenges also relate to hospitals very much. Why do I say war readiness? Because this is exactly what we are faced with right now, even though it hasn't been noticed a lot in the public discussion. All NATO member states are very advanced in preparations for a probable upcoming conflict with Russia. And Germany, as the biggest economy and the well, basically the country with the biggest population that is fully in Europe, plays a major role in that. And hospitals, and this is a connection that many people don't notice, play a major role in that as well. Why is that? It has to do a lot with geography. If a conflict should happen in 2028 or 2029, Germany is a transit country, meaning that somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million troops coming from the west will have to pass through Germany to reach an eastern front. We already have quite detailed plans for that in place. We even know which facilities can be used to host people, which routes have to be both in autobahns and rail transportation to move material and people from west to east. And there are also not as detailed, but plans in emergence as to what Germany's role could be in the treatment of patients that occur in any military crisis. So the estimations are that about 1,000 injured people should be treated in German hospitals per day if a full-fledged conflict should come to pass. And one of the reasons why that is because we have so many hospitals. Just to give you an idea, we have about 1,700 hospitals in Germany. To make that easier to grasp, it's about twice the number of hospital beds per capita as most other industrialized nations have. Not because that makes any sense, just because that's the way it is. A nice preparation is always between the German state of North Rhine-Westphalia and the Netherlands, because they're adjacent and they have almost an identical number of inhabitants, and they have almost the same GDP, so they're economically quite well comparable. North Rhine-Westphalia has about 370, 380 hospitals. The Netherlands have 75. And the Dutch don't do us the favor of being sicker than we are or dying sooner, so it's probably us who have too many, which is a disadvantage economically, but it's a clear advantage in times of war because they're already there, they're already staffed, and they're already in operation. The Bundeswehr, the German army, does not have the capacity to treat a major number of patients in times of conflict because among those 1,700 hospitals, the number of army hospitals is 5. That's all they have. They're a bit bigger, but they're far too small to host any of that. So we have a 2-tiered plan right now where the first wave could be treated by those 5 Bundeswehr hospitals, another 9 hospitals that are owned by Social Security, which is responsible for treating injured people. They have some very good, very effective hospitals for treating major injuries. But then that's 14 altogether, still a bit too few. So there's a second tier behind that, and that's about 700 out of those 1,700 hospitals that have both the size and the specialization to treat basically soldiers and injured civilians in a war. These hospitals, and I'm talking about the second tier. The first tier are very well financed and in very good shape, but not enough to treat those numbers of patients. But those other 700 that include the 37 university hospitals and a number of other major hospitals are in no way prepared for what's coming in a hybrid warfare scenario, including cybersecurity. Because if such a conflict should take place, and we all hope it doesn't, of course, but we are right in the middle of preparing for that to happen. If that should happen, what would be the expectance towards a hospital that takes a part in such a conflict? In the context of IT security, cybersecurity, the resilience has to be there to withstand any Russian cyber attack that could impinge on the ability of the hospital to treat its patients. This resilience, and I'm talking about 2025, is absolutely not given for most German hospitals. The situation that we're in, to have the robustness not only in medical systems, but every supporting IT system in the hospital in times of crisis and war is not there because we didn't have crisis and war and we were not forced to prepare for that. Same is true for the Bundeswehr itself. We are now investing 500 billion euros on top of our defense spending in the next years to make the Bundeswehr ready. Just to give you an idea of what that means, the annual military spending of Russia has tripled from 50 to 150 billion euros, and we are spending 500 million euros. There are commentators in the United States that say, are we really sure that we want the Germans to build up a strong army and position it in Eastern Europe? Seems like we are. And the same is happening now for hospitals. It hasn't really started yet, but just last month, the German Bundestag has granted 4 billion euros additional financing for German hospitals altogether. That is not focused on cybersecurity. That is for their deficiency situation, but part of that will come there. There are military experts that we are in touch with that say that out of those 500 billion euros that are to be spent on the military, and there's another 500 billion euros to be spent on infrastructure. About 100 billion is supposed to be for healthcare, especially hospitals, to prepare them for a conflict. Why is cybersecurity such a cornerstone for the ability to prevail in a crisis? If we look at the current situation, and we are at peace with every country in the world at the moment, formally, if we look at a number of cases just in the last few years where German hospitals have been successfully attacked, we saw that firstly, they were absolutely not well prepared to take on those attacks, and secondly, for many of them, it took them weeks to get back in operations, because what you need to know about hospitals is that it's a rather complex business. It's not only treating patients in medicine, in nursing, and so on. It's also a very complicated logistics and supply issue. We've had supply issues with drugs last fall, where some drug manufacturers could not deliver, which impinges, of course, on the ability to treat patients. They have to provide food for 1,000 or 2,000 people per day. They have cleaning and hygiene at a totally different level than a normal industry company, of course. They have radioactive waste from treating patients. So it's a rather complicated business, and if you manage to shut down one part of that, everything else comes to a halt as well, as seen here. And that's not only small, unimportant businesses, but it's also, see, Ameos Group is one of the major private hospital chains in Germany, that was basically shut down completely, all of their hospitals, not only one of them. What makes it more complicated is that our hospital system in Germany is more diverse than in most other countries. If you look at Scandinavia, for example, or the UK, you have that one state operator that operates most of healthcare. In Germany, we have a mix of everything. The biggest European hospital, private for-profit hospital chains are all in Germany. Out of the top 5 in Europe, 4 are Germans. 1 is French, I think. We have, that's about 1/3 of the market. Another third is private non-for-profit, church-owned hospitals, Red Cross, and so on. And only about a strong third is public, but that's also spread out because usually hospitals belong to one county and the next county has their own hospitals and they don't cooperate. So we have hundreds of hospital operators, each with their individual and mostly insufficient IT infrastructure. The impacts of a successful cyber attack on hospitals are devastating because if you imagine how information-driven the business of treating patients is, you know that the sheer unavailability of that information, and be it just a successful ransomware attack, means that you can no longer continue operations. Imagine you don't know the preconditions of the patient because you actually don't have access to his patient files. You can try and see if your physician remembers every detail about the 35 patients he has on his ward. That might work. Usually it doesn't. You have delays in vital procedures. If your system is offline, your radiology department is offline. If your system is offline, your drug logistics are offline, and your emergency department will no longer be able to operate. So that usually means that you're offline as a hospital. There's a central agency where you can say, we're offline, please don't send us any patients, and patients will be forwarded to other hospitals. But that implies that those other hospitals are operational. So with the cases that I just showed you, no patients came to harm because they were treated in other hospitals. But if you imagine a full-fledged attack on a whole region, where all the hospitals are no longer operative, you have an idea of what that means, even in times of peace. There's also an issue with privacy and data security, because it doesn't get a lot more private than your medical record. Imagine what would happen if privacy is compromised there. And in the end, it's a risk to human lives. If your hospital shuts down while an operation is taking place in the operating theater, that's probably bad news for the patient. So, how does that look from an individual hospital? And this is where we are active. My company works almost, not exclusively, but mostly for hospitals, say 80%, 100% in healthcare, and we provide management for hospitals and consulting services, where we also have to take care of the prevention of crises like this. If you look at what you need to have to be able to cope with a cyber attack, it's real-time capacity management. And now we're not talking about the fancy university hospital or the Bundeswehr hospital that's been well-funded. Let's talk about, say, the 400-bed community-owned public hospital somewhere in the Bavarian woods. You have an IT department there with about half as many people as you would need to cover all the needs. They're public employees, so their wages are as attractive as you currently imagine them to be, meaning that probably they're not all first in class in their education, and they're usually at 100% of their capacity just taking care of the slowly failing infrastructure of that given hospital. Slowly failing because we have a rather peculiar investment financing system in German hospitals. Most of our business is public health insurance, because 90% of Germans have public health insurance, another 10% have private health insurance, other than in some other countries. Everybody has health insurance, but public health insurance is the biggest part, but they only pay for your running cost. The reimbursement system for German hospitals does not include CapEx, meaning that every investment, be it in a new building or be it into new servers or whatever, has to be financed by the state that the hospital is in. Federal Republic of Germany means we have 16 states as a federation, and right now we're in Bavaria, so if you have a Bavarian hospital, the state of Bavaria is supposed to refinance all your investment needs. So if you need to invest $2 million, or euros in our case, into new IT, you have to ask for an investment grant from the state of Bavaria. And this has been the law since 1972. There is not a single German state that has ever fulfilled that law, that they cover all the investment needs in any year since 1972. So if you come into a German hospital, especially in a Western German hospital, in Eastern Germany it's a bit better because they got a lot of money after reunification, after 1990. So you might expect at least the building infrastructure to be no more than, say, 30 years old. In Western German hospitals, it might be 50 years as well. The IT is usually not 50 years old, but we often see Windows 10 in German hospitals. We occasionally see Windows XP, so you get the picture. And this is what these guys are there for. Simulating attacks is probably not something that most of them have ever done, or at least have done in recent times. You need to manage the supply chain for a rather complex supply. A hospital needs to have access to at least a 5-digit number of products, from medical devices to food that has to be managed in IT. You have a rather fancy document management because legislation says that you have to keep every document for every patient for at least 30 years or as long as he lives, whichever is longer. And you have to make sure that you always have access to every record. You need a backup concept. You probably want to go into the cloud. Most German hospital management infrastructure systems are not even cloud ready yet. We were the first to bring a German hospital into the cloud when the law had changed 2 years ago. Before that, it wasn't even legal to host patient data in the cloud. And everything else. One point that I'd like to point out, because it's often forgotten, is crisis communication. If something happens to the hospital and you're offline and patients must fear that their data is lost or in somebody else's hands, the breach of trust alone is so significant that you need to make sure that you have a very professional and very fast crisis communication into all the directions. Unfortunately, most of the times that is forgotten, leading to major lack of trust by patients, providers, and it's a trust-based business. You never go into a hospital where you fear that your treatment might not be optimal. I asked my colleague who prepared this presentation for me to include a private photo of mine. This is an actual photo. I will not disclose where this was taken, but this is the actual server room of an actual German hospital in 2023, and it's all of it. There's nothing more. And they host all their data on premise. And this is not an exception. This is not an especially bad hospital. It's not an especially good hospital either. But this is what you usually find in terms of hardware and infrastructure. Around the corner, they had some cleaning material, but that's all. Pardon me?
What's the gallon is doing there? Is it for the generator?
The gallon on the right?
Yes.
Around the corner on the left, there's some more cleaning material.
Okay, it's cleaning.
This is a floor cleaning solution.
Okay.
So I guess the hygiene of that room is impeccable. But that's probably the only positive thing you can say about it. So if any of you might find it interesting to see if they could do something for German hospitals, and this is the main task of my speech here, to make as many of you aware of the situation, that there is really work to do and groundwork to do, this is what you might expect. And this is what you have to start with. And that's good news, because you can do a lot with very little, probably more than with your usual customers that are much more advanced, where you have to start at a much higher level. The other good news is that with the crisis coming up and with the funds that I've just mentioned, there will be new funds that weren't there before to finance improvements in cybersecurity, to make sure that this is a picture of the past in most German hospitals. And all of that, if possible, in the next 3 to 4 years, because that is the time span that is given by the current geopolitical situation. There are even people who say that if there is no war between Russia and the NATO until 2030, there will not be one, because Russian demographics are so dramatic, and they have had so few kids since 1990, since the end of the Soviet Union, that starting from 2030 on, they won't have enough young men to fight a war against anybody. So this has to change within the next 2, 3, 4 years. And we're very keen to see where this is headed. On the other hand, even for us, and we've been doing this for the last 25 years. My company was founded by my academic teacher, Professor Oben, and myself almost exactly 25 years ago, so we know a couple of hospitals. But even for us, it's hard to get the attention for this issue due to the fact that about 80% of German hospitals are running at a deficit right now. This has nothing to do with cybersecurity. It has all to do with the financing system, with the fact that what medicine can do and what it costs to do what medicine can do has grown a lot faster than our GDP and the funds that we spend in public health insurance. It has also a lot to do with the fact that, other than most other countries, we do not limit access to the whole provision chain. You can go to any specialist you want to in Germany. You can go to every hospital you want to. If you live here in Munich, you can go to a hospital in Hamburg and they will take you on. And this is one of the reasons why we have such a vast infrastructure. On top of those 1,700 hospitals, we have about 130,000 outpatient physicians, both GPs and specialists. And that costs a lot of money. And as we do not provide enough funds, most of them are running at a deficit. We've had about 40 to 50 bankruptcies in German hospitals in the last year. And this is an ongoing issue. So you have to scream a little bit louder to get the attention of a hospital for the cybersecurity issue. The cases that I just showed you where hospitals were out of business for 4, 5, 6 weeks and had major damage taken to their perceived trustworthiness and also to their profitability, made most of German hospital CEOs very aware to the situation. Also, with legal changes on the European level, NIS2, crises, there is a personal liability of hospital CEOs, as for any other critical infrastructure CEO, to make sure that cybersecurity is a given and is in place. So that also adds to the addressability of the decision makers in that context. So, and as I said, we have 4 billion coming up starting in October to be issued to hospitals as additional funds, and probably up to somewhere to even 100 billion euros to strengthen the infrastructure out of those 1,000 billion euros that our new legislation has taken up as additional debt to improve both our infrastructure and our military. So at this very moment, from my perspective, it's a perfect combination of a devastating IT and cybersecurity infrastructure in a very diverse and very uncoordinated system as it is, and an upcoming challenge that totally transforms both the awareness and the funds to take care of that issue in the upcoming 2, 3, 4 years. And that's probably why you had me here, because that's a peculiar situation, and it's a situation that is different both from other industries and from other healthcare systems in other countries. Therefore, some impulses for, I hope, the upcoming discussion. What German hospitals need to establish, and only very few have established, is a health security center that has both the resources, not only quantitative resources, but qualitative resources, the people who really know their way around cybersecurity, the people who are able to fend off a concentrated Russian attack, because those are also, as we know now, already very much focused also on healthcare and hospitals, as they are on energy and infrastructure and whatever, but also on hospitals. With access to resources for risk communication. One thing you have to be aware of is in healthcare, people who work there, especially those that wear white coats, are usually not in the business because they're very IT prone. It's usually either that or healthcare, and therefore even the awareness that you have to bring up in your own staff is harder to reach than in other industries. And you have to have the crisis authority, which is probably in the process, we don't know yet, which is probably in the process of being taken away from individual hospitals because the German military, with their medical advisory board, is in the process of setting up centralized risk management structures for crises that are also for hospitals, but for every other aspect of critical infrastructure as well. So if we are able to integrate all necessary actors, and you folks are a very important part of that. Unfortunately, in the discussions I have, I see that many haven't even thought about healthcare or hospitals in the past because people think it's boring. Take it from me, it's not. It's absolutely not boring, and it's absolutely vital. But here we have to bring together actors from both the civilian and the military sector and enable collaboration. This is really only just starting. I assume, that's really only my perception, that out of those about 700 hospitals that are supposed to be on the list for the second tier in wartime, most of them don't even know they're on the list. It's not even a list that is publicly disclosed right now. Of course, it's a secret. But this will come, and they will have a phone call with the person that they haven't met before and that wears a uniform. They will have new possibilities, new funds, but also new challenges to harden their infrastructure for what is probably about to come. And once again, we all hope it's not coming, but it's always better to be prepared. And we are in the process of spending hundreds of billions of euros to be prepared, also in hospitals. And this has to lead to individual emergency plans, covering, of course, also a lot of other tasks apart from cybersecurity alone, also stockpiling of resources. This is something we have learned in COVID. The availability of medical masks, of hygiene gloves, and then later on of vaccinations has been something that hasn't passed unnoticed. We're better at that than we used to be in 2020. But now it's not only about masks and gloves. Now it's about everything a hospital might need. Including drugs, including making sure that energy is there. I know quite a few German hospitals that are no longer testing their diesel electricity generator because they fear that it might fail. So you see how basic the issues are that we are in the process of addressing. With that, I hope I managed to stay between the frustrating truth and the magnificence of the challenge that we have in my little branch. It's not a little branch. Healthcare is actually the biggest sector of German economy. It's bigger than cars. It's bigger than machines. To at least make you all wonder if that is something that you might want to take a closer look at. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank you on two different causes. It's one that you gave us a very frightening vision in your talk, but also the vision of the future and your that you changed something. I want to thank you for that as well. And maybe there are yes, there are questions. I will throw it to you first, and then you can just give it one row ahead. There you go.
Thank you for the great talk. Actually, I would have 3 questions. First question would be, in my opinion, hospitals are already obliged to follow the crisis requirements and so on. So how can it be that such a picture exists? Then the second question would be, how long, from your experience, does a hospital need to be more or less ready to conquer that? And third question would be, do you expect that there will be a huge waste of money because of inefficiency in this whole system, then public companies trying to gain money and stuff like this?
Yeah. The answer to all of them is yes, no. First of all, crisis criteria for hospitals were enlarged in the not so distant past. So the number of hospitals that fell under crisis regulation was smaller and is now gotten bigger, and also the ones that had to follow crisis regulations, but that stays among us, are probably not up to the tasks of withstanding Russian attacks as it is. But the enlargement to at least have all the hospitals that we are talking about here into crisis, that was like, when was it, 2 years ago? And not all of them are transformed as it should be. As for the efficiency of the process, that is an issue. That's a real problem. And apart from what we discussed here, we had a lot of money being poured into the system in 2020 under the German abbreviation KHZG. That was a law to improve IT infrastructure for German hospitals, and it was funded by the government with another 4 billion euros. I don't know why it's always 4 billion. It seems to be the magic number in German healthcare. And that went into higher hourly bills of software consultants to a large extent because it had a not so bright time frame where everybody had to reach the same steps at the same time. So every German hospital has to have a patient portal ready by the beginning of next year. So everybody who is able to help with that was booked 3 or 4 times over. And just increase their hourly rates. So there will be inefficiency in that. As for the time frame of hardening hospitals to external attacks, it's hard to say. To make sure that the basic stuff is in place, if you have the funds and if you have the people in place with the expertise required, that's a process of 2 or 3 months. To make sure that you tick all the boxes and everybody in the hospital has had their training and nobody opens the wrong email anymore, that's probably a process of 2 or 3 years.
What I was missing is how do you involve the vendors of medical software? Because in my experience, I mean, the software development standards are a bit appalling, and which is innate due to, as you say, you find people who have a certain understanding for medical reason, not necessarily for that, and therefore which seriously impacts the hardening.
Mm-hmm. I would love to include them. We have 2 issues here. One is an austerity issue, which is one of your big issues. At least we're somewhat austere from Russian vendors, but the Microsoft world in hospitals is a specific issue. But the other thing is that the German patient record management software systems especially the bigger ones, Orbis is one of the big ones, are usually legacy systems that have just been developed over decades and never really, there was never really a cut to bring them into a new IT world. So that's a big issue there. There is no regulation on that, apart from the normal regulation for software vendors. And I don't see anybody in the process of making sure that that happens.
I'm talking even further, vendors such as whatever, Philips, Siemens, and so forth, who actually produce the appliances which are all integrated now.
Mm-hmm. Those are medical products in a European sense. So you have to apply for an MDR approval, medical devices regulation approval. And you can get your MDR for your German Siemens CT scanner from a Dutch authority or from a Portuguese authority because it's European. And the bar is far too low. Everybody agrees on that. But of course, lobbies and industry says the bar is so high that if you raise it even further, we have to charge more for our devices.
Okay, thank you.
Wow, I saw a lot of more questions, but I gotta ask you. Yes, you can throw it for me. Yeah. Okay, it's more of a football now. I gotta ask you to
I'll be
save
here.
the questions to the lunch break that is right up ahead. But I also ask you to take out your phones. I forgot to mention it earlier today, and rate this talk out of 5, and also the talks beforehand. So be sure to make that. I want to once again thank you so much. You're my favorite type of ethical hacker I've ever met. So thank you so much for your talk and for your cause, and I hope we will get there soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.